Let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. James Wilson, a pioneer in gene therapy and professor at the Perelman School of Medicine at UPenn, whose work discovering AAV vectors led the foundation for today's in vivo gene therapies and is now advancing access to gene therapies as the CEO of Gemma Bio. Please welcome Jim Wilson as he delivers his talk entitled Gene Therapy as a Disruptive Technology.
Great. So thank you. So when I showed up at Penn 35 years ago, excited about building a gene therapy center, but worried about what the business model would be for what we were trying to develop, and that is rare diseases and one-and-done treatments. We still have that problem, but now it has become real. I'm not going to comment on some of the challenges we have by the current administration in the current market. That's going to pass. I've been doing this for 40 years. But I do want to comment on what are their fundamental challenges that we have independent of some of these other external forces. And the way that I think about it, first of all, the venture community and the pharmaceutical industry are not immoral because they're not taking on our diseases. They're not doing anything wrong in terms of what their fiduciary responsibilities are. So pointing fingers is not going to help us. But my title of my brief comments is Disruptive Technology, and this is epitomized by some of the work of Clay Christensen, who was a Harvard Business School professor here. And there have been examples of disruptive technologies, and we've learned some of those lessons. The way that I think about the problem is a Venn diagram. So we have the cadre of products, diseases that the pharmaceutical industry will take on, and there are certain requirements of market size, sales potential, competitiveness, et cetera. And then there is the world of genetic medicines and what diseases can we really potentially impact, treat, or cure. And what we were looking for, and what we're looking for, is an intersection of those two spaces, so that pharma, who's ultimately the commercializer of our discoveries, how many of those that we could potentially treat or cure will pharma take on? Well, it's limited. But the problem amplifies as we as scientists develop new technologies and show that we can impact more broadly on rare diseases. So if you think about the way it was when I was at Penn, and pharma did this, and there was essentially little that we had proof of concept of. But what's happening at an increasing pace in our community is what is possible is growing. So this now space of diseases that we could potentially cure or treat is growing, but the intersection isn't growing. So the question is, and it's only going to get worse, and the question is, how are we going to address this growing opportunity that isn't being pursued? Well, forcing the pharmaceutical industry to come up with new rules of engagement isn't going to help us. We're going to have to develop new business models in how to approach this growing need. Terry nicely talked about two dimensions of the problem. One is, it sort of relates to a title of a lecture that I give nowadays, and that's the potential of genetic medicines unless you're too poor or too rare. Now, the American Society of Gene Therapy is taking on the issue of if you're too rare. And rare, that can hit anyone, independent of where you are in society. But I do not want to ignore the too poor. So if you look at the cost to our country, or whatever country, of providing health care per capita in the United States, $13,000 a year. In the UK, it's $7,000. In Brazil, it's $721, and in India, it's $71. So as we try to solve the problem, the business model, by charging more, we're creating an enormous healthcare disparity, because these countries in which the payers are the governments simply can't afford them. And I think we can't ignore the fact how amazing it is. Sometimes it's not feeling that way these days, living in the United States of America, where we have $13,000 per year to pay on average for our health care, as opposed to in Brazil, $721. So that isn't the solution. So do I know what the solution is? No. But we have identified some choke points that I just want to briefly share with you. The bottom line is the playbook that we operate under, and you're all here, is discoveries made in the academy, licensed to a biotech, VC put money in, create value and liquidity. They make money. Products are then licensed to pharma, and then they're commercialized, and everyone's happy and succeeded. The problem is pharma is not going to solve our problem of that growing non-intersection, which means who's going to commercialize our products? When we really pry and lean into this, that, I believe, is the biggest crux of what the solution is. Who's going to commercialize? Who's going to manufacture, distribute, and provide access to our products? So we have to develop a new commercial model. I suggest that the commercial model that's been developed in pharma is incredibly irrelevant to what we need to do. First of all, if we could focus on editing and gene therapy, these are one-time treatments, not repeated infusions, et cetera. So you don't necessarily have to have your pills available at every CVS or an infusion center at every hospital. Patients need to find a way to get to a place where there is access, they get their treatment, and they can go home. Sales and marketing. We're not talking about market penetration here. When you have a product, you are the market. So in the company I'm leading, we don't plan on spending any money on sales and marketing. We have to worry about reimbursement. The reality is in the rare disease space, they are networked internationally. One thing happens here, it is known throughout that community. So for better or for worse, they are your sales and marketing, whether it's better or whether it's worse. And we do have to find a way, as we've heard, to be very capital efficient. So no matter what we come up with, we have to have products that are likely going to succeed, and we have to be able to develop those products in a very affordable way. But if we focus on, and then this is my last point, platforms, but most importantly, I would argue, as drug developers or genetic medicine, please focus on diseases of the most significant unmet need. Because if you do, it's going to be a lot easier for you when there are headwinds. The probability that you're going to succeed is great. Clinical trial design could be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 patients. You don't probably need placebos, and they're unethical. So again, I'll just, and happy to talk more about it afterwards. I think it's time for us to recognize market failure and learn from the lessons of Clay Christensen and other disruptive technologies. The anecdote that I'll end with. When I came to Penn, it's a hub of the pharmaceutical industry. This would have been 96, 97. I was consulting for a major pharmaceutical company, and I was trying to convince them to invest in gene therapy. And the CEO pulled me aside and he said, Jim, basically, as a drug that we developed, if you can't swallow it, we can't sell it. That was in 95. Well, if we didn't have proteins in injectables, where would this be? So there will be light at the end of the tunnel, but there may be challenges that are unique, and I think it's going to require organizations, and I think they can't solely be nonprofit for us to solve these problems. All right, thank you.